let me start off by saying there were two sources I could go to get things rolling for this. One was a book written by Etta Tuthill about the brief history of Bayshore. She had a small section in there about the fire department. And I'm going to read some names from there a little bit later on because you still hear a lot of these names in Bayshore today. They're still around. The second, and the one that's most important to me, in 1991, when I happened to be chief of the fire department, we celebrated our 100th anniversary. And a gentleman named Bill Dumagawa, this is his brother Paul, who's going to speak to you a little bit later about something. But Bill researched for years and put together a complete history in this book. I don't know if the library has one. I can check, but I know Priscilla says there is one available. You can read.
These two copies.
Okay, at the museum. So, okay, so if you get a chance, if you haven't seen this, it's a complete history. And my plan for this evening is just to tell you a little bit about myself and how I came to be here in front of you this evening. And then I'm going to take you back to the 1800s, and I'll work you up to the 1950s. And then at that point, we'll go through some pictures here, and you can ask questions or tell me to move on or whatever, and hopefully we'll do okay here. So, my history in Bayshore started in 1948 when I was born in Southside Hospital, and I've been here ever since. And my life began to change when I was 6 years old in 1954. For a simple reason, my father joined the fire department. And as I got a little bit older and I began to meet some of the neighborhood kids, all their fathers. This is over at Brook Avenue School. Kenny Tooker, who's here tonight, his cousin Glenn Tooker, Billy and Mike Kiernan, Bruce Lewandowski. We all grew up together. Our fathers were all in the fire department. We were all rugrats at 60 East Main Street. We were down here all the time. And it just, it's into your blood. Without a doubt, it simply takes you over. So from that point on, I was kind of hooked. 1959, I joined what was called the Juveniles. It was all boys, junior firemen more or less is what they're called today. And we practiced marching, we practiced working with hoses and ladders, we had competitions just like the big team, and it was a really interesting experience, especially the 1 or 2 years that a fellow named Timmy Ferran was involved, because this guy could pick you up with his pinky and tell you did that wrong, and that's a whole bunch of other stories. 1966, I graduated from Bayshore, went off to college, came back in 1970. And in September of 1970, 3 very important things happened. Of course, I have to say the number one and most important, I met my wife. In September. I joined the fire department in September. And I began teaching here in Bayshore that September of 1970. I taught 6th grade for 33 years. And every year I would always talk to the kids about when they got older, try and give back to your community. Not just fire department, ambulance, historical society, anything. Try and get involved. And I must say, I'm very proud of the pretty large number of Bayshore boys, and now women, who have come through my classroom and ended up in the fire department. And right now, 2 of our current chiefs are former students, Brian Butler and Roy Eklund Jr. So it's just really rewarding to me to see that happen. And not that I can take credit, but I'm very proud of the fact that I did have them in school. In the 1980s, I was in the engine company, and I was elected. First, I was a treasurer. The rule of thumb in the fire department, if you want to lead the company, you start off by being secretary or treasurer. So I was treasurer for a number of years. Then I was elected second lieutenant. Each company has a second lieutenant, a first lieutenant, and a captain that runs the show. Way back in time, the captain was called foreman, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So in the 80s, I was company officer. And then in 1987, I was fortunate enough, I think there were 4 other guys running. There were 5 of us that were running for chief, and my peers selected me. And it was quite an honor, quite a lot of work, but quite an honor. So from 87 to 88, I was second assistant chief. 89 to 90, I was first assistant, and then 91 to 92, I was the chief of the fire department. And in 1991, we had our 100th anniversary that the fire department had spent years preparing for. We hosted the county parade that year and tournament, and it worked out really, really quite well. So now it's 2019, almost 2020. When it gets to be 2020, I'll have my 50th year as a fireman responder. I'm still responding. I'm the oldest Class A fireman in the building. Not that I'm going to throw a pack on and go running in, but I can if there's an emergency or bad enough. But see, I don't go in. But anyway, I still love it, and I still go. I think they drive a little too fast for me. And this is how we get alerted. No, I arranged so you could hear. This will be a test, okay? Okay, now, I'm going to throw you a few, being a former teacher, I'm going to throw you a few quizzes here. This is how we get alerted today. It will also come over my cell phone, so we get alerted 2 ways. You might have noticed in the last year or two, you might not have heard fire sirens so much. All right, and mainly it's because we haven't been in our headquarters for 18 months. Hopefully that'll be ending soon. But with the alerting system between the pagers, cell phones, the sirens, I know some of the young guys don't want to hear this, are becoming a thing of the past. So we'll see what happens with that. So anyway, I've been very involved with the fire department, and I was very pleased to answer the request to come and speak here and try and bring you up to date on the history. So let's go back in time. After I get you up to about the 1950s, then we'll go to a PowerPoint, which one of the young guys put together for me. Not so much in the order I would have liked, but it'll work, and we'll get through it just fine. So let's go back to the 1880s. Where is Bayshore? Not here, you're out of town if you're in this piece of property. It's all to the east and south, which most of you know. And if there was a fire, what could you expect as a homeowner? Hopefully your friends would come over and help you, but there was nothing in the way of firefighting at all. And in 1884, a business and home that belonged to Mr. Robbins burned to the ground. And some people began to talk and said, we have to be able to do better than this. And in 1885, the Hook and Ladder Company was formed. Now, first quiz. Why is it the hook and ladder? What's that all about? Anybody?
The hook. That's the pole to break the roof up.
Okay, very good. It's called a pike pole, actually. It can be of different lengths, and it's got a metal hook on the end. Excuse me, and a well-trained fireman can take roofs off, take windows out, take doors down with their pike poles. Now, for those of us not in the hook and ladder, we always give the hook guys grief because they look like shepherds standing there with their pike poles. Move out of the way and let the firemen go in. And still very competitive to this day, but in any case, Hook and Ladder was formed in 1885. So, if you had a problem, what could you expect? Well, first, you had some work to do. No matter where you lived, you had to get to the 2nd Avenue Firehouse and start pulling the bell. No phones yet, very few at best, no cars yet, so you had to run. Start ringing the bell. Now, a lot of the firemen lived right in that area. 1st Avenue, 2nd Avenue, 3rd Avenue, and they would come running and they would bring their cart. What was on the cart? Some of those poles, some ladders, and maybe some buckets. And that's it. At best, they were going to maybe save the neighbors' houses. I mean, if it was really a burning fire. Not much they could really do. They would do their best. Sometimes they managed to get enough water on it and knock it down, but most times it would get out of control real fast. And they were trying their best. And that was, the Hook was formed in 1885, and their house was on 2nd Avenue. And here is a picture when Susan Barbash restored that building. And we helped her dedicate it. We actually brought the Hook and Ladder, the current Hook and Ladder, which the truck is bigger than that building. So, it would never work. But notice the hose tower. Bet you didn't know that was a hose tower. The bell is up in that tower. But we'll get to that a little bit later. That tower had a very specific job to do after each and every fire, which we'll talk about shortly. All right, so next big change in Bayshore came in 1889. A group called South Bay Water Company began to put water mains in Bayshore. So where would that be? My guess is they went down Main Street and ran lines south to the bay and maybe up to Union Boulevard, because that's where the dam was. Don't forget, when the high school was built in 1938, what did a lot of people say? Why did you build it so far out of town? Okay, so I don't think the water mains went very far to the north. Definitely where the big money was to the south, but I'm assuming along Main Street. So now, they had a source of water. Still the Hook and Ladder Company, another big fire in 1889. They had no hose. They had to go to a lumber mill, according to Miss Tuttle there, and they had to borrow some hose from them to try and use it. So they realized we need to make another step here. So in 1891, in January of 1891, a group that called themselves the Connecticut Hose. This is their meeting book from January of 1891. The initial minutes are in here, the list of all the members who joined. They kept the minutes for the entire year, and they also kept a log of all the fires. And the log of all the fires is interesting. Operated 2 heavy hose lines and lost the building. And that's pretty much, what they were learning as they were going. So we have to do even better. So the Connecticut Hose Company formed in 1891, and a few months later, the Bayshore Hose Company formed. The Connecticut Hose Company moved to a building on 5th Avenue, which was later moved to Smith Avenue. My early remembrance of that building, it was the Dorothy Singer School of Dance. If any of you can remember that, in the middle of Smith Avenue was this big building with a hose tower on it too. So it was kind of out of place there. It is now directly behind St. Patrick's Church, and it's a Hibernian Hall. So it has moved from 5th Avenue to Smith Avenue down to the church. So it's a very happy building. It likes to move around. But again, you had to get to the fire department, and you had to ring the bell, and then they would respond. And this is all on foot. Now, what did the 2 hose companies bring into play? They had carts, wheels about this high. They held maybe 200 feet of hose. They had 1 nozzle on the handle. The Bayshore Hose spent a lot of money a number of years ago, and they shipped their original hose cart from the 1891 time down near Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and they had it restored. And it's in beautiful, beautiful, beautiful shape. And it sits right in the middle of the lobby at the main firehouse. So if you ever get a chance, you're over that way, take a look. Before I go on, most of you know the firehouse has been under renovation. Everything that's here comes from Paul's house and my house. Everything that's historical is locked away in storage somewhere. We have no idea. We were supposed to be back in there months ago, so I had no worry about doing this in November, where I could have gotten a whole lot more artifacts to show you. So maybe at some point we can even convince the powers to be, if you're interested enough, we could have another meeting there, and we could show you all the stuff. So, but unfortunately that's not up to me. So we'll see if we can take care of that. Anyway, what do you suppose happened with the Bayshore Hose and the Hook and Ladder on 2nd Avenue and the Connecticut Hose on 5th and later Smith Avenue? Competition. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, not like the city where they would get into brawls with each other to see who would get there first, but it was who could get there first. And of course, I guess the home run would be to put out the house burning right next to the other guy's firehouse, but I don't think that ever happened. So there was competition right from the beginning. Later on, they learned to channel their energy and work with each other. And to this very day, fire departments have a sport. It's called fire department racing. Ladders, nozzles, hoses, climbing, and whatnot. And back then, they got so good at it, according to the Tuthill book, the insurance industry actually lowered the rates for the residents of Bayshore. They were so proficient. So in any case, they would run. So I'm thinking to myself, if you ran from 2nd Avenue to the end of Saxon Avenue, what kind of shape are you going to be in? Did they walk? So I went to our resident expert, Charlie Holmes. Don't know how many of you know Charlie. Last picture, when we see the slides, Charlie's in it. I wanted him to be in it so I can just tell you. He grew up on 2nd Avenue. He knew about the firehouse, knew about everything about it. And I was talking to him, and he told me a story. I just learned this the other day. A home run for either company, or the hook, coming out, would be to have a merchant or whoever come by with their horse and wagon. Get rid of the wagon, you're taking our cart. And they would do that. And later on, even, when the earliest cars were around, they would even convince people, let us hook to your bumper here and pull us where we need to go. So it had to be a lot of work. It had to be a lot of work. And then it was going to be even more work at the fire because you were basically really handcuffed. You only had a couple hundred feet of hose now, and you're trying to work off hydrant pressure. So you're only going to shoot water from here to the door, really. They didn't have pumps of any kind. And that's the way it was through the 1890s. From 91 on, that's the way it pretty much stayed like that. In 1895, a fourth company joined the Bayshore Fire Department, the patrol company. We call them fire police also. Today, their biggest job when we go to a fire, they control traffic. If we have a building that has fire damage, let's say we have a bedroom on the 2nd floor, the patrol company would come in with tarps, try and cover everything, get all your furniture together on the 1st floor, and they even have water backs to try and clean it out, make it a little bit better for you when you get back in. The scariest story about the patrol company is they were actually deputized. They could carry guns. I don't know why there was a need in the 1800s for firemen to be showing up with guns. I have never figured that one out. So I don't know what was going on there. But they, fortunately none of them pack guns anymore. So I don't even think they're deputized anymore, to be honest with you. But they formed in 1895. All right, so we move on a little bit, and now it's 1912. And Bayshore started to grow. And our guys are still coming out of Smith Avenue and 2nd Avenue, and they're tired of running. They've been running all these years now. We want motorized trucks now. Voters turned them down. Keep running. You're doing fine. Keep running. So, not happening now. So, they did. And along about that time, they realized they needed a better location or a better building to be coming out of. The firemen themselves actually ran bazaars and did other fundraising activities, and they came up with about 1/4 of the money, and then the townspeople came up and they bought a piece of property which is at 60 East Main Street. And that opened in 1914, and the companies moved in there in rapid succession, and that's where everybody was going out of. And that seemed to work pretty good. In 1915, they finally got the first motorized truck. Went to the Connecticut Hose. Shortly thereafter, Bayshore Hose got a motorized truck. Now, they chose a slightly different route. They had a chemical fire truck. Neither truck carried water, but you could obviously hook your hydrant or whatever. But the chemical hose, it had 2 big canisters, like giant fire extinguishers. And they had X amount of chemical in there. And I remember one of our other old timers that some of you might remember, Charlie Elliott, telling me about a fire like in 1920, way up on Saxon Avenue with leaves burning under a porch. So they went up there with the chemical truck, put all the chemical down, and it was still burning. And then they just watched the house burn. And down to the ground. So, you know, that was all they could do. Because there was no water up, you know, off the sunrise. Just forget it. There was nothing up there. In fact, even when I got into the fire department in 1970, a big part of Bayshore north of Sunrise was still on well water. No hydrants up there, no anything. And the only thing that changed that was a hazardous material spill from a dry cleaner. It wasn't really a spill. He was dumping it out the back door in Brentwood, and it was coming down. And they had to get all those people off the wells immediately. So they Suffolk County ran the water finally to them. And also, speaking about that, if you go over on like Manor Lane, south of Sunrise, you might see a couple of old wells, pipes sticking up out of the ground. One of them's bent over like that. There were no hydrants. There were no hydrants over there when it first started either. Right. And the fire department would actually come and try and draft water out of those pipes out of the ground. Didn't work. Didn't work very well at all. And they were abandoned. it's amazing that they're still there, because that's from the early 50s, actually. So, in any case, so by 1915, we have a new firehouse, we're motorized, and we have pumps now, and they're starting to get really better at putting out fires. But it's still, you know, not anything like today, but they're trying, they're really coming along. 1924, arson in the firehouse. A disgruntled fireman poured gasoline on all the trucks, lit them off, okay? And the end result of that was the hook and ladder, which was motorized at this point also, not an aerial, nothing that would raise, just carry, it was a long, stretched out truck, would carry ground ladders. That was a Mack, it was destroyed. And interesting thing, several neighboring fire departments, Islip, Babylon, several Nassau County fire departments, Lynbrook, and I think Rockville Center, offered trucks immediately. As long as we need it, you can borrow one of our trucks. Who really stepped up, the Mack Fire Truck Company gave them a demonstrator model for as long as they needed it. And I believe that's what they settled on. And they, as fast as they could, they were able to replace it. The other trucks, they managed to rebuild all of them. Guys back then were excellent mechanics, I guess. So they rebuilt them, and it was decided at that point there would be a 24-hour watchman on duty at the firehouse. So, that was a big change, because now some other things could happen. Telephones were also coming into being, widely used, enough so now you could call the operator and they would put you in touch with the watchman at the firehouse. So to enhance that, they erected behind the firehouse, big metal tower, was there for many, many years, and put a siren on it, first siren in Bayshore. And that's how, from then until the mid-1950s, that's how you knew there was a fire in Bayshore. You heard the whistle, you went to the firehouse. And it speeded things up tremendously, and it was a big enhancement. 1925, my company came into existence, the engine company. For whatever reason, we were only a 20-man company. So we always had this chip on our shoulder that we can do as much work. The other companies, the hook and ladder had 40 guys, the patrol and the Connecticut hose and the Bayshore hose had 25 guys. So we always had to show them we can do their work too. So again, this competition thing. And you know, if you keep it under control, competition's a good thing. I went to a meeting in North Belmore a number of years ago when we were first starting our antique truck. And it was at their North house. So I asked one of the guys, I said, you ever have any problems north and south here? No. He says, we get along with great. A couple minutes later, this guy comes over to me and he says, that guy's full of baloney. It's like the Hatfields and the McCoys. And I can remember an ex-chief at Bayshore, he was a custodian in the middle school, George Penny, told me he happened to be in Babylon and there was a fire on Main Street. And he sees this guy pull up in a car with a hydrant wrench and stand at the hydrant nearest to the fire. Because he was from whatever pump company, and no other truck was getting on that hydrant until his truck got there. And that's what can happen. Fortunately, we've been very good in Bayshore. We haven't had situations like that. Okay. Now again, as I said, each company has 3 line officers: captain, first lieutenant, second lieutenant, 2-year terms. You move up every 2 years, and secretary and the treasurer. Nowadays, we also have trustees. Just an oversight on the money that each company. If we want money in the engine company, you have to go out and have fundraisers somehow. In fact, right now, we're doing a Black Friday cash raffle, which they sold out in like 2 days. So we're only going to make X amount of dollars. It's a 50-50 raffle, and that'll be our money to do with whatever for the year for our company. So they're always coming up with different ideas. 1930, Bayshore Hose got an American LaFrance Metropolitan big pumper. They always like to call it the big pump. Bayshore Hose got. You know I got to give you. All right, so interesting story real quick on this truck. They kept it till the 1950s. Town bought it to use it at MacArthur Airport. They had it re-lettered, all set to go. The FAA said, you can't use that truck, it has no water on it. It has to be hooked to a hydrant, it's no good on the runway. So it went to the town yard in Bayshore, and everything slowly got stripped off of it. And at some point, Charlie Kirkup from Kirkup's Lumber Yard purchased it. He and his sons restored it. And just about everything on that truck that was original, they found. They went to firehouses around here where stuff had been given to, Brentwood, East Brentwood, they found stuff. The bell he found, so he got that in Brooklyn. And the other hard part was the railing across the front. He got that in New Jersey. They used to go to shows all up and down the East Coast, and he was able to restore it. And then when we got it, we gave it a complete frame-off restoration. It's 89 years old. We use it for local parades, unfortunately funerals. It's perfect height. We use it for funerals. Did have a problem with the engine one year, and Paul's brother Billy and a fellow named Jimmy Jr., they spent the whole winter. They had to take the entire engine apart, rebuild it from the ground. They even had to cast their own bearings for part of the transmission or something, and they got it running perfectly. If it ever goes totally bad, Charlie Kirk still has the Memorial Day Parade every year. The little car rides around it. That's got a spare 1930 LaFrance, American LaFrance engine in it. It's giant. It's all engine, that little thing. So, in any case, that's our antique truck. World War II comes. Bayshore lost a lot, not lost. Bayshore had a lot of guys go off for the war. They started something called the Victory Hose. They took 1 or 2 guys from each company, and they recruited some more guys who were still left in town. And for the length of the war, they were like a separate company, but they were available for all calls as well. At the end of the war, they broke that company up again. The guys went back to their original companies, and anybody who wanted to stay, I think, was assigned as soon as openings came up to the companies as well. But during the war, that was a big thing that happened here, this Victory Hose. Now, after World War II, a very interesting thing happened. At least I think so. Because it affected me even in 1970. A lot of guys came back from the war. They had seen some real nasty stuff. They had been involved in the service. They knew discipline. They knew how to give orders. They knew how to follow orders. And Bayshore Fire Department, and I'm sure a lot of other fire departments along and became very regimented. And basically, you as a new person, back row, keep your mouth shut, listen to what's going on here. And that's the way it would work. And even right to the early 70s, a lot of those guys were now in positions of authority, commissioners, chiefs, whatever. And it was really interesting because they kept a lid on everything. Now, could they go out and have wild times? Absolutely. But when it came to being firemen and obeying what you had to obey, they were really, really on top of things. 1947, the fellow who put my PowerPoint, which we'll get to in a minute, together, didn't have a picture of this. I don't believe it's in there. In a cemetery, they dedicated a monument. Every year, Memorial Day, we march to Brentwood Road, and we have a little service at this memorial. The literature said it was the first of its kind anywhere. Now, I don't know if that means Long Island, New York, or the United States, but it was good. They were thinking out of the box. They were also buying equipment that other departments weren't even thinking about as well. Now, 1951, a very important date in Bayshore history. Bello came to work in Bayshore as the mechanic and manager of the fire district day-to-day operation. Artie Lewandowski. Now, Artie was a consummate mechanic, and those trucks were his babies. And if you had a problem, you didn't touch the truck. You got him there, and it was taken care of. And our trucks very seldom had any problems at all because they were absolutely over the top as far as maintenance and making sure that everything ran fine. And he stayed there for quite a few years. When he retired, his son, Bruce, took over as the same position. So for like a 60-year span, we had the 2 fellows, father and son, that maintained all of our equipment. And it was always in absolute best condition. 1954, we got the first aerial ladder in Islip Township. No more just ground ladders. This thing could elevate 75 feet. 1954 Mac. Interesting thing, it was the only one, and they got called to all the other towns when they needed an aerial for quite a few years until the other towns began to buy them. And a fellow used to work for the school district, Jimmy Scala, lost him last year. He was in the hook and ladder, he was young. Sometime in the late 50s, I'm going to guess this was, Land's End in Sable burned badly. They wanted the aerial. It's January or February. He goes out in a t-shirt, out of his house in a t-shirt. So he and Joe Finner and some of the other guys, when you see this truck later, you see what I'm talking about. You had to ride on the side of it, holding a railing, on a platform like that, from here to Sable, below freezing temperatures. When they got there, they're lucky they even got there, because when they got there, they basically fell off the truck. They couldn't move. It was, you know, but that's the way it was. When you see my first company truck, which Joe trained me on, Joe McNulty in the back there, open cab. Didn't matter if it was raining, snowing, hailing, open cab, and off you went, and you were either on the back, getting pelted, or whatever. It was interesting. But in any case, so 54 we get the aerial, first one. Again, we're kind of ahead of the thing, the curve, learning curve. Now, it's 1955, let's say. So it's been over 30 years, the siren. That's the only way you know there was a fire. Your only option was to go from your house to the firehouse. And, funny story. Remember Grill's Pet Shop, 3rd and Union? Okay. If you go over the railroad tracks and you make a right onto Brook Avenue, you have Rhodes Avenue right there, lots of firemen, maybe 10. 2nd Avenue, firemen. Go up towards Brook Avenue School. Kenny's father, his uncle next door to him, my father, Joe Atkinson on my street, Dougie Rogers, his father, another 10 or 15 guys. They'd all take off, and they'd all meet at Brook Avenue, and they'd all be squeezed in at 3rd Avenue, and they'd start heading south. And one of the grills that would work there would come out and try and stop traffic. These guys would go past him 4 wide, because they all wanted that firehouse. They all wanted the seat to drive, or they all wanted the nozzle. It didn't matter. They were going. And there were 1 or 2 cars that were actually overturned at 3rd and Union. Firemen going. So, and then of course, there was Freddie Fragey, great old guy, really strict guy. He came down a rainy day, came down 3rd Avenue. He locked up his car in a skid about where Schiller's Southside Hotel is. Turned sideways, kept right on going, went right across Main Street, right to the curb. There was an empty spot. Oh, yeah, okay. So, this kind of stuff went on all the time. And you had guys coming from Lightwaters down Main Street, and guys coming from the east side of town, and could be a real menagerie at times. Okay. An amazing thing happened. Okay? Well, I gotta do this in the right way here. This happened. Somebody said plectron. It's not a plectron. This eventually turned into plectron, which turned into plectron, who was bought out by Motorola. This was a Bayshore fireman, Larry Walker, patrol company. In, of all places, the old 2nd Avenue firehouse. He called these hobby radios because I believe it was to him a hobby. We were the first in the country in Bayshore. The Daily News came out, did a big spread, showed Arthur Lewandowski asleep in his bed with this right next to his head. Now you wake up and you know where you're going. Just think about it. Before this, if I'm going to a fire, I have no clue where it is. I know I'm going to the firehouse. The fire could be a block away. You could be getting somebody out of a burning building before the rest of the fire department gets there. And this thing was phenomenal, way ahead of its time. And after that article, I think these guys, Plectron, had this in mind. I think they quickly bought him out. This also had a nasty habit. This is wood. A lot of guys ended up keeping these in their bathtub. They had a nasty habit of burning. And And we got a fire at the fireman's house, so not good, not good. So, but in any case, to me, that's one of the more amazing stories of it. This guy was ahead of the whole country, and we had it here first in Bayshore. And it's just fun. This one actually came from West Islip, so I know he sold them there also. I don't know how big he got, how many departments he actually got to. But now the dispatcher in the firehouse presses a button, speaks in the radio like you heard before, and you know where you're going. Now, today, I don't know if it's a step back or whatever, it's not like it used to be, where you could drive to the fire, and you'll see pictures in a minute here, if I have time. You have pictures, you see all the gear on the trucks. So I could go find my truck, put my gear on. Now it's all kept in the firehouse, and it's all bunker gear. And it's like putting on a giant play snowsuit. And you gotta go to the firehouse again now. If, obviously, it's right around the corner from your house, you could still respond there in an emergency, okay? But they prefer you get to the firehouse to get the trucks out. All right, now, I brought you up to the 1950s. One of the young guys put together for me a PowerPoint presentation. So, we have a quiz. If you know the answer to it, hold it to yourself for a minute. Okay? Where is this firehouse in Bayshore?
Behind you.
Sure, Priscilla.
I'm missing you, Windsor and Union Boulevard?
Good guess, but no.
No?
Okay.
House Road.
Alice Road, because that firehouse, yeah, that firehouse became this firehouse. The walls of that original firehouse are the north end of the building. And now this firehouse doesn't look like this anymore because of the reconstruction. But in any case, that was called Station 1. But some of the older guys had a nickname for it. They called it the Shell House. Shell House.
Shell station.
Exactly. By Peter Pan Diner, it was a Shell gas station. It was a clone, right down to the cupola. Funny thing, same architect. So many older guys called that the Shell House. 3 trucks rolled out of there, and it was the first move off of Main Street. Main Street was getting harder and harder to respond to with traffic. Okay? This was our next move up. And here's a picture you'll never see again in Bayshore. 3 Mack fire trucks. Pumper, tower ladder, pumper. They're out of business. They were the standard forever, Mack fire trucks. That truck there on the left, engine company truck, we normally look to get 20 years out of it. We just retired it. It's a 1982 truck, do the math, 37 years old, when we just got rid of it last year. And it was immediately bought by a collector. So, the tower ladder in the middle went to Lakeland, and was in the news recently. It's down in Kentucky somewhere, and they made some kind of save. It was on the news. So it's still in service, 1974 tower ladder. The Connecticut hose on the far right there, for whatever reason, that had body rot, rust issues right from the beginning. Mack tried to make good, but it was just always a constant problem with that truck for whatever reason. But the engine on the left lasted 37 years. Okay, here's Main Street. Today, I don't think you could put a single piece of equipment in there, because if you notice there are poles there, and those poles were hit 100 times even with this much smaller trucks. But that was home until 1973 when we moved to 5th Avenue. They kept it open as a 1-truck station for a couple more years. By that point, they built on Union Boulevard. Okay? So, while they were building the headquarters at 5th and Howells, they actually had to use eminent domain. There was a street there called Main Street. And they had to take several houses to build that firehouse. And they had the parking lot back. And somebody was clever enough. There was a garage that was fairly big. They just expanded it. And we ran out of that house with those 2 pumpers for like the 2 or 3 years that headquarters was being built. It was on the far south side of the property. And that was the Bayshore Hose big pump on the left, and the open cab engine company. They were both open cabs on the right. Okay, 2nd Avenue, and I'm going to assume that is BayShore Hose. Okay, that's BayShore Hose, and they've gotten away from the little 2-wheeler carts. They've gotten to bigger carts, but still they are pulling them by hand. Gotta be heavy. So, this one is the Connecticut. No.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Again.
Okay, Connecticut Hose over on, it's either 5th or Smith Avenue, depending when the picture was taken. And there are the boys, all happy. The uniforms are a little different back then. All right, for a long time, if you look at any old fire department pictures of the companies always liked to take pictures back in the day. They always did it at the high school. They were so proud of the high school. They always took pictures at the high school. But when this station opened, I guess it was something new. And I'm not sure, that might be BayShore Hose right there. I think that's BayShore Hose right there. Okay? And this is the fire patrol company. Okay? You had Bill Keenan in there. Kenny's dad should be in there somewhere. And Uncle Roy also. I see Bill Uranick over there. Harry Scala. White Terry, the big guy there. Interesting man. I won't move into that. Okay. So anyway, the 2 Opizio brothers down in the front. One used to be custodian in South Country. So, hook and ladders here. Again, probably late 50s, 40 men. There's Bucky Ball in a white hat on the lower left. Eddie Muir with the white hat at the far end there. All right. Here's a shot of the 3 chiefs in their high-class chief's car. Okay. 1968, I think my father was an assistant chief, is when they finally went to 3 chief's cars, 1 for each chief. Up until then, I assume whatever chief got to headquarters first, take the car, but it was parked in front of a truck. Might have been parked in front of the hook and ladder. So the hook and ladder guys had permission to move it. And they always used to play games. If the fire was west, they'd pull the car out facing east. And just to let you know we're here. So there's always something going on. Guys are always coming up with ways to mess around. All right, this could be possibly the engine. I love how they take pictures in the middle of Main Street and there's no traffic. Yeah. Like, yeah, we'll do it there. So, yeah, that's a big hose on the side there. I don't know what that's all about, but we want to pick that up. Oh, going back to these hose towers. That was linen hose. Probably didn't have a rubber liner. So after every fire, had to go back, hoist them all the way up to the top of the hose tower, and let them drain overnight. Try and preserve them, keep them going for them. Every truck had 1, 2, 3 hose boots on it. They were blowing holes in them all the time. They just didn't last long. And very careful about not dragging them. Even when I got in 1970, in the back of headquarters, it looked like 2 giant pizza ovens. At that point, we were putting the hose in the ovens to dry it. So, you know, it's really not that long ago that we're doing some funny things here. I believe this is, the picture says 1922, all the companies at headquarters. It could be around Memorial Day, perhaps, I'm not sure. All right? And that's the whole department there. This is the engine company getting a brand new truck. This is the one I first trained on, that Joe trained me on. And there's my father with a funny look on his face. I asked him, what's up with that? He said it was like 10 degrees out there. They were all freezing. And very cold. But Charlie DeWitta, commissioner. Frank Helbig, commissioner. Joe Janowski looks like he was captain. Well, unless Frankie was Jeffrey Jr. in the middle, I can't tell. And then the chiefs were Harry Scala, Eddie Muir, and Bill Wesselhoff on the end. Wow. Those were the chiefs back then. And I think the same day they did that, this is what was called an apartment truck. This could be used by anybody if you're trained on it. And the idea with this truck, the 2 hose reels on top. Back then we still had a lot of brush fires around town. Bayshore not developed like it is now. And those were 2-stage pumps where you could really rev the truck up and you could blast the ground apart. where the fire might be burning under the ground. And again, the commissioners and the chiefs in that picture. Halloween. In the 1980s, where the Bagel Boss is, in that area, there was a dry cleaner, a hobby store, which were totally destroyed. The Italian restaurant ended up getting destroyed to a large degree also. It was just tough fire to get at for whatever reason and put out. At one point, ISOP was working in the back, and their bucket truck broke down. And the very time it broke down, there was like a flash over, huge ball of fire. Those guys had to come scrambling out of their bucket down the emergency ladder on the boom to get out of there. So our hook guys that were on the roof were literally coming over the edge of the roof head first down the ladder. I mean, the whole roof went like a wave when this thing let go. It was a tough fire. And then you always have to have a comedian at a fire. This was Deli on 4th Avenue between Union and Main Street. Pretty bad fire one morning. The reason I remember it so well is one of our old timers, Jack Skinner, came out his driveway, and Bobby Holtz lived down the road and pick him up, drive to the firehouse. Jack came up, it was black ice, boom, goes down. So Bobby gets him, he gets in the car, and by the time he's getting to the firehouse, he's like screaming. He had fractured his hip. And so I actually spent just a few minutes at that fire, and then I had to go to the hospital to make sure Jack was okay, and then I had to go to school and teach. So it was, it was just one of those days. But Jack recovered, so all was good in the end. Uh-oh, what happened here?
Just click
The
next.
escape key.
Just click the screen there.
Okay, there we go. 4th Avenue, near where Tallulah's is now. Two of our firemen almost met their demise in this fire. Ralphie Leggio and Joel Morera. Roofers doing a roof. So what you see is the roof burning here. They tried to get it from the inside, and before I knew it, they fire in front, fire in back. One of our younger guys at the time, Pat Busco, had come in behind him with a line and got water on them so they could get out. But they were burned, they had to go to the hospital. And we were there quite a while. That building ended up coming down. And I believe the building in that lot now, something might be, yes, something is going in there now. So, tire fires at 4th and the railroad tracks. A couple times. First one was on a Sunday. My son was maybe 8 or 9 years old. He was playing across the street at South Bay. He came flying in the house. You gotta look, you gotta look. And it was, looked out the front, there was this column of black smoke. About 1 million tires were burning. Interesting, the wind was out of the northwest. It put down all this rubber soot right down on Fire Island ferries where they had just painted their ferries. It was a real mess. We were there for hours trying to put it out. There was some pictures of it there in the local paper. Okay, interesting fire. I remember this one vividly. Connecticut Avenue and the railroad tracks. Big building called the Valentine Factory. Anybody familiar with that? Okay. This was the first time it burned. This is an unusual picture because when you see firemen doing this, lots of hose lines standing back, you can't even see the building. You know nobody's going in that building. It's burning too bad. Okay, it's just not safe. Well, we managed to knock it down and put it out, and then a few months later, whoever lit it off really did a great job one night. We didn't put that one out. It burned to the ground before we could put it out, finally. But it was a big factory back in the day. Okay, 2 brand new identical 1958 Mack trucks, Connecticut hose, BayShore hose. And again, competition, who could pump better, I guess? I don't know, they're just training here. But we do have a great resource here in the Great South Bay, but it is salt water. The rule of thumb is, you draft salt water, you go back to the firehouse, you have to flush the truck out for 45 minutes with fresh water. You can't just put it away. You're even supposed to flush your hose out. So it's kind of surprising to see them there. When we draft now, we try to go behind the old duck pond in on Manatug. So the neighbors don't like it, but easy source of fresh water, and we can practice going to draft. It's an important skill, and I know when I was chief, twice I had trucks go to draft at fires. One was for a boat fire, and one was for Kim's Upholstery on Main Street. That burned one morning, and I had a Bayshore hose go behind the band shell there they drafted over there. This, I believe, was one of Bayshore's more deadly fires. I believe this is the senior house on Maple Avenue. It might be where the parking lot is next to your society building.
That separate building.
Yes.
The back.
Right. And this was cram-packed with elderly people. In fact, they were there 4 hours, and somebody opened up a door about this wide, and there was a lady, that was her room. They were like amazed to find out. I mean, she survived, but at some point, the chimney collapsed, came down, a couple of firemen up in the attic, whatever. Everybody was okay, but this, all the news from New York City, they were out here because quite a few people died. Speaking of deaths, it's one of those things with the fire department, unfortunately. It happens. All these years, we had one fireman die in a fire. Henry Fields was his name. On the east side of the canal was the big beach cabana club. And it burned during a big storm one night. And he went down with a heart attack and he passed away. The department doctor was Dr. Quackenbush right around the corner. They ran and grabbed him. He came, he gave the guy an adrenaline needle about 2 feet long, it looked like. And it was too late. He passed away. I think the deadliest year ever in Bayshore history as far as for fire deaths was about 1958. We had the McNamara fire on South Connecticut Avenue. 5 people died there. And later that year, around Thanksgiving, on Clinton Avenue, south of Howells Road, I think 5 or 6 people, an entire family, got killed in that one. So whoever the chief, might have been Harry Scala, I'm not sure. But I think the total for that year was like 13 deaths. That was like, that's been fortunately, or unfortunately, never had a year like that again. So, but it can happen. Okay, Main Street. If you drive on Main Street, you will see 3 parks that have been built.
Yeah.
They were all spectacular fires.
Yeah.
Okay? This one is right next to what is now Coastal. A little bar that opened up. There's a nice, very nice garden there. And I remember this when I was a little kid. They kept, the firemen desperately kept trying to get up into the apartment above. A good friend of a lot of the firemen was a fellow named Joe Finelli. His mother was in there, and she perished. She did perish. So, but eventually, the guy George Penny I mentioned before, he did find her up there. But that one was really big time fire there. They were there for hours and hours. I believe that's the same fire again. You can see some of the businesses that were in town at that point. Not sure, that's Raleigh, Manila in the front. Dougie Rogers, not sure, looks like, okay. Entenmann's fire. Okay, this was the back building. All right, and it was quite a mess, obviously. It really went, I guess, all flour dust in there didn't help. And it was a spectacular fire, but they obviously managed to rebuild. I believe that was 1946.
Right.
Okay? This one is where the band shell now is. And I know that because, remember, R.H. Macy is a liquor store, right? You'll see it better in the next picture. But another big fire from back in the day. Joe Janowski driving the engine to Grant's, Park in Maine. Okay? Had a fire going on in there. All right? See the guy up on the top, he wants to use the deck gun. That's what that big cannon is called, the deck gun. Today, of course, we can't say deck gun, we call it a stang. Haven't figured that one out either. So, Joe Janowski at the scene of the fire again, as chief. I think I'm over my time. Can I keep going?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Jeff Upton, Danny Holmes, I don't know who the other guy is, and they have just rescued a dog, it looks like. All right. Ralph Davies, I'm not sure who that is behind him, but again, these pictures, last 2 pictures are probably early 70s. Timmy Ferran, happiest man in the world. Great guy. Great guy. Worked for Loco forever. And I remember he was an officer, and I was fairly new, and I had the nozzle for a fire on Main Street. And I thought it was burning too much. My heels were dug into the ground. He pushed me straight in. We went in. We were going in, and it was interesting. So now, that's my father. He's not happy. Why would he not be happy? He's a chief and he's holding a hose that's been disconnected, there's no water. You have a garage that's burning away. Quiz number 2, where is this? Between 3rd and 4th Avenue. The apartments that used to have a whole row of garages. Okay? And he wants water and he wants it right now. All right. Again, not sure where that one is, but we've always managed in Bay Shore to have a good turnout. So back to that Grants Fire again. Used to have a great luncheonette in there, right? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, like Bill Clark's. Okay? Late 60s. I was actually working in the Kismet Inn at that. We could actually see from Kismet that this place was on fire. It was really burned up on the 2nd floor there. They were so proud, they were so happy with the BayShore Fire Department. They couldn't do it at once. They did 2 different seatings. They fed the entire department as a thank you. Several months later, or a year later, when they finally got up and running again. So, but I'm not sure, but I'm thinking this is 4th and Main. And I'm thinking this is worse than you think it is because it looks like that part of the building over there has collapsed up high. Okay? So, I don't know. I know Whalen's drugstore eventually ended up on 4th and Main. I don't know. So, but I'm just not sure on that. All right, another fire somewhere. Notice that house is the old asbestos shingles, which you don't want to have anymore. Okay, you're going to operate a pump, you have to know how to read gauges. Okay, it looks pretty complicated, but it's actually fairly simple. You have a big gauge that tells me how much water is coming into your truck, called a compound gauge. And then all of the smaller gauges up top there are for individual outlets on the truck. And each truck has several hose lines pre-connected, and you can tell exactly how much water. And the rule of thumb is, well, my rule of thumb is start about 100 pounds, see if they need more. But you always have the guys on the nozzle are directing you. You also have safety valve on here called a relief valve and a dump valve. And it prevents too much water from surging through the lines. Because if you put too much water, I don't care if you have 2 or 3 guys standing on the line, it will launch them and send them backwards like a rocket. Now if they're working on a roof, you can see quickly that's a real problem. So you really have to train to operate these pumps, especially from the safety aspect of it. You don't want to just be blasting away there. Notice the gear in the racks, no more. Your gear consisted of the helmet, the boots, and what was called a turnout coat. It wasn't a raincoat, turnout coat. Some of the last turnout coats had special liners in them. But even the most modern gear, the bunker gear we wear, if you read the label inside, warning, do not expose the flame. What's going on? All right, I believe we did a fire prevention one year at the north end of the mall, and I'm pretty sure we set a car on fire. So, or that might have just been an actual car fire, I don't know. All right, our fire department band, and here's John Wahlberg leading the band. He did that for a number of years. Okay, I'm in there somewhere. There was our first minority member, Charlie James. We now have many. We have females now, and if you were welcome to come down and join. We need help, I'll be honest with you. None of the companies are full. We all need help, first time ever. We don't have a full boat as far as members.
What's your age limit?
Actually,
I tried to join the Connect White one and they wouldn't let me.
we just had a 72-year-old guy, gentleman. You look at him, you never know he's 72. Come in, join, do the whole fire school, do the hands-on, everything. And it's unbelievable. I don't think they can put an age limit on it anymore. If you can physically do the job. Wow. So,
Don't get any ideas.
where was this tournament held?
Coney Island.
Coney Island. They had us in there. But these same guys, a few years, well, maybe not these same guys, before that, in 1940, at the end of the World's Fair, they had a fireman's tournament. Guess who won? BayShore. To this day, they still have that emblem on the beach truck. 1940 World's Fair champions. So, yep. So, now, Pepsi, look closely.
Is Bobby Burka.
Bobby Burka, Harry Penny, Pat Boges. Billy in there or not? I don't know. I'm not sure. Jack Elder on the end there?
Could be. Yeah, might have been around 60.
Oh, that's also, that's all. You know who that is right in the front with his head down? Glasses? Billy Murray.
Billy Murray.
Yeah. So they're
My bill
forming
did
somewhere.
I don't think my bill ran efficiency.
Okay.
He got off the truck.
And we have Bayshore Junior Fire. But I can't say firemen anymore, even though we do, because there are more girls on the team
I
now.
have that picture
than
somewhere at home.
anybody is able to join, and they do miniature versions of big team racing. And they've won the state championship numerous times, the Bayshore Juniors, many, many, many times.
Like 20,
Okay.
I think it was 20 or 21.
Now, look carefully. What's on the side of this truck? Connecticut Hose Company, from the General Motors Truck Company, and it was from an outfit in New Hyde Park that I guess would do the final assembly, I'm not sure. But, so that was an early Bayshore truck. That was another gem that, I don't know where Billy Domagala was finding this stuff back in the day, but that was another one that he got. Here's an early patrol company truck. The thing was so top heavy, and you'd stuff like 20 guys in and go into a parade, and you always wondered if it was going to make it. So, fire patrol again, Christmas. Around the holidays, you might see in your neighborhood, one night, the firemen will go to the homes of members of the fire department. This year, on December 21st, they come around and do candy canes on every street for everybody in town. So I'd still like them to get involved with part of the festivities on Main Street with hot chocolate or something, but they're bringing people all over the place. They bring Santa down to the canal and then to Main Street on the same day also. So there's a lot going on. There's an old hook and ladder, no aerial, but you see how long it is. The longest ladder could reach 50 feet. It was so long it had outriggers on the side of it. I've only seen it used once or twice. And that's when men were men, because it probably weighs 500 pounds. But this, going back to when R.D. Lewandowski was in charge of everything, every year, every wooden ladder would be sanded down to bare wood, restained, revarnished, and sealed every year. And the guy who did that for the longest time was Al Highland. He was a former painter, and he was good at working with that stuff. And they came out like they had just been manufactured that year. This was our first attempt at a mini pumper here in Bayshore. I ended up driving this truck quite a bit. It was located on Union Boulevard, and coming from my South Country school, it was easy for me to get to there. Two guys would ride that. If guys rode on the back and they started jumping around, the front wheels would come off. It wasn't designed very well. Not that they would ever do that. This is the company truck that Joe McNulty and I trained on, the engine company. And again, if it was raining, there's a chrome bar behind the front seat. You could push that up and there was a tarp that you could put over. It didn't work. And then you really can't see this. The windshield wipers are on the outside and inside. So, not a lot of fun. Not a lot of fun in the winter. That's the old hose cart. That went to East Brentwood. That went all over the place. But that was our prime single alarm truck. Leaf fires, car fires, whatever, for a long time. For a long, long time. It's an old floodlight truck going way back. Again, middle of Main Street, no cars. Okay, they're off somewhere, and they love their snow chains. Or they love their snow chains on. Now you gotta have snow chains. This was the Pennant Hose Company truck. They had a lot of problem with the body rod. Notice the gear up there. So if you're going through a fire and your gear is on the truck, what are you doing? You're up on the hose bed while the truck is riding, putting your gear on. And then you climb over the rail to stand on the rear running board. Number one, it's illegal to ride on the rear running boards anymore. No trucks even have them. And there's no gear on the trucks for you to put on. That's the way we used to work it. You crawled up in the hose bed. Some guys, back in the day, would get to the headquarters. They'd grab their gear, stand on the rear running board, and I know in the engine company, they had what was called a tray. There'd be a nozzle right there. Take the nozzle, put it between their legs, finish putting their gear on. They wanted to be geared and be the nozzle man when they got there. So, amazing. That was Joe Janowski. That was one of his favorite tricks. Way back in the day. All right, here's an old peanut truck. Also, that truck, there was a bad crash in either I think it was Lynbrook, 2 fire trucks, early 1950s. Or sometime in the 50s. And before they got the big Mack trucks that I showed you, the 2 of them, they had that truck. When they had a crash in Lynbrook, they gave that to Lynbrook, and they used it for a period of time until they replaced their 2 trucks. So they never forgot way back when they had the fire. All those years later, they were able to repay. There's the hook and ladder. This was the one you had to ride on the side, holding on that rail in the back. This big, holding on. Stop signs whizzing by your shoulder. But there was a set of steps that led up to that turntable. I would put my gear on and I'd sit on those steps. And I would always wear a hooded sweatshirt. I'd put the sweatshirt up and just kind of like hold the rail and just hunker down and go for the ride. And there was just nothing you could do about the cold. So that's part of the reason why everything's encapsulated now. That's part of the reason they had to build onto the firehouse. These trucks would get lost in the firehouse the way it was, which is the way it was when the house was designed in the late 1960s. Now, before they did this addition, if this was the running fire truck, my gear is right here. I am trying to put my gear on, and this truck is moving right behind me. It was way too dangerous. Plus, we had 2 trucks back to back. You had this much room between them. The young guys, I was on them all the time. Do not walk between the trucks when they're running. Somebody drops it in reverse, you have no legs. In a heartbeat, they look at me like, what? It's like, so that's part of the reason, that was the big reason they had to extend the firehouse out 20 feet, just to make the truck floor safe. And I think they were actually moving all of our gear off the truck floor. It'll be to the south side of the big room, so you're nowhere near the trucks. And so hopefully that'll all work out fine. Another patrol company truck, a fellow named Pappy Collier, senior pilot for TWA. Flew for years. He also flew when he drove this truck. Because other than road flares, they didn't have much in it, so it was very light. So that was always an issue. So, hook and ladder, floodlight truck. That was the big Mack for the peanut hose that was replaced when I went to Lynbrook. Now, this picture is not here to prove that I had hair.
Yeah, right.
This picture is all about the guy in the middle, Charlie Holmes. 91 years old, 72 years in a firehouse. The fire whistle goes off right now. He'll be going to station on Union Boulevard. He's still responding every day. He changed companies. He went from the engine company. He went to the fire police. He knew he couldn't do anything firefighting-wise, but he could still direct traffic. So he's just a phenomenal guy. Double knee replacement a couple of years ago, didn't slow him down in the least. Just really, really nice guy. So, but okay, basically that's pretty much it. Other than the fact, just to get you right up to today, we have 5 pumpers. We have 2 aerials, one tower ladder with the bucket on the end, 1 aerial. We have 3 patrol trucks, 2 small Ford vans, and a bigger van. We have 1 heavy rescue, 318 it's called. That thing lives on Sunrise Highway. I cannot encourage you enough if you're driving around Bayshore and you're on Sunrise Highway, be careful. We are up there continually, and we're cutting people out of cars there. And that's what the heavy rescue truck is for. It also serves as a floodlight truck. So be careful. The exit ramp off Sunrise at 5th Avenue, they should weld the guardrail shut there and just get rid of it. Now, Priscilla and I are both on a summit council. We've had speakers from New York State come. They all say the same thing. Poorly designed road in the 1960s. We have no money to fix it. Well, I don't buy it. They can do it. They won't even put the lines in. You go to West Islip, you get your own lanes.
Yes, not in
The part of it, the reason is 129,000 cars in the morning through Bayshore, Sunrise Highway, and Southern State Parkway. 129,000 cars every day. And they just, too much traffic for them to be shutting lanes down. So they're just not going to do it. We also got a brand new, several weeks ago, high water brush truck. Okay? We got it on Wednesday. Thursday night, we pulled 56 people out of Whalers and the Lake House about a month ago. Okay? Last year, we pulled out over 100 from those same two restaurants. You can't convince me that there isn't global warming. Where are these tides coming from? Unfortunately, with that new truck, it's also a brush truck. We've never had one. They went out to the county training center once a year. They bring in a national instructor, a well-known guy. They set a course up through the woods. There were 4 trucks there. 3 trucks go through. Our brand new truck basically falls apart. Turns out it was not built to the specs that were called for. They used tubing instead of piping. They tried to cut corners. It is now back in Philadelphia where it was made. There is a lawsuit, and the guy is like willing to do anything at this point to get us off his neck, which is basically he's going to have to rebuild it the right way. But we did get to use, if they keep it just as a high water truck, it'll be fine. Everything is high on it, so they can get down into 4, 5, 6 feet of water. A couple of people drove their cars out that night. I guarantee they have lost their cars since then. You cannot go through salt water. It just kills your electric system today. All right, I hope I piqued your interest a little bit. As I said, it would be nice if we could ever do this at the firehouse. We could show you so much more. But there is a place you can go right now and see some things. And Paul is going to speak to you for about 2 minutes on that. Paul?
About 26 years ago, some guys got together in Sayville and decided we got to try to preserve the artifacts and the history of all the fire departments within the town of Iceland. 26 years later, we have a building right across from Duck Stadium.
Yeah.
All right?
Great.
All that money was raised, fundraisers, donations, and there was no taxpayer money in that building. The construction was all union guys donating their time and materials to put that building up. And each town in Iceland, each fire department in Iceland town has their own display. Every 3 months, we rotate the trucks in there. Right now, our truck is up there. It's been up there for a while because we got no place to put it down here right now with the construction. And they want to keep it up there because it's a big draw. A lot of people come in looking for it. But there's no admission to come in. We're open on weekends. I have a schedule here if you want to look at it. I have some brochures. Please help yourself. And I will be up there Sunday, as a matter of fact, from 10:30 to 3. If anybody's interested in coming up, there's our schedule where we're open. And it's a great place to come up and see what's going on there.
Every fire department in Iceland Town is represented. And as you go in the door, you start to your right. They're in order of when they were formed. Iceland was the first fire department. We were the second. Back in time, Bayshore met Babley. There was no West Iceland. 1951, West Iceland finally formed the fire department. So back in the day, I don't know what they used as a boundary line. But they were going even further to the west. So it's interesting. So if you have any further questions while we're breaking everything
Just
down.
to comment on that,
Yes.
that is a wonderful place to visit. It's worth going just to see your big American La France truck. It's amazing.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Two things. I don't know why, but you probably aware that on Brentwood Road, across from the Conde, There's an old fire engine standing right
Yes.
there.
Yes.
Why do they let that thing deteriorate like that without trying to
Many,
save
many
it?
years ago, it was a used piece of equipment Brentwood Fire Department sold it. The owner of that bar wanted it in front of the bar for whatever reason. That bar has changed hands 20 times, and the truck is still there.
What's the way?
Yep.
Another thing, one other thing. Why
Yes.
was that guy so agitated that he set all the trucks on fire? What happened?
Don't know. I do not know. He was mad at his father, is what Charlie Holmes.
His father?
Yeah, he was a fireman also, so yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So, but, again,
Very interesting.
my pleasure. Priscilla?
Did you hear anything about the first engine from a car that was put as the first motorized engine from Mollenauer? Adolf Mollenauer donated his engine from his big, wonderful car as the first motorized fire truck in Bayshore.
Okay, I was not aware of that. I know what a lot of departments out there had the big old steamers. Bayshore never had one of those. The big round steamers, and they would be drawn by the horses. They tried hanging motors on the front of them. They actually got a motor. Freeport still brings one to a parade from back in the early 1900s. Speaking of that, another quiz. Real quick. Why a Dalmatian?
The color.
Why a Dalmatian?
No. Oh yeah.
Maybe, maybe. No. It turns out, when the horses were kept in their stables, they were big draft horses, I guess. They were kind of skittish. They found out that Dalmatians would calm them right down. They were kept in the stables for the horses. And then they eventually kind of became, when the horses went away, the dogs stayed. So, yes. So, all right. Thank you again. Thank you for this.
We definitely will work something out to do something. That sounds good.